Brothers and sisters of Africa, the time has come to strip away illusions, to cast aside the lies fed to us by those who have no interest in our freedom, and to confront the truth, a truth that has been buried for decades under layers of propaganda, manipulation, and fear. For too long, we have been told that we are free, yet our economies remain tied to foreign dictates, our natural resources siphoned away, our leaders compromised, and our people lived with little more than slogans of independence, while real power lies elsewhere. The time has come to call out the deception for what it is, modern slavery dressed in diplomatic language. There are those who sit in high offices, speaking in polished tone, claiming to serve the people, while behind closed doors, they sign away the land, the minerals, and the future of our children to foreign masters. There are those who beat the drums of democracy while silencing the voices of their own citizens with bullets and tear gas. They parade as champions of order, while presiding over chaos as protectors of peace, while waging war against their own people. This hypocrisy can no longer be tolerated. The African Union, an institution meant to be the voice of our continent, must not prove whether a continent, must not prove whether it stands with the oppressed or with the oppressor. It must decide whether it is a shield for the people or a cover for tyranny. Too often it has chosen silence over action, diplomacy over justice, and photo opportunities over real change. Silence in the face of injustice is not neutrality, it is complicity. When our brothers and sisters are beaten in the streets for demanding bread, jobs, and dignity, we cannot sit in comfortable chairs and speak of patience and process. The suffering is real, the oppression is now, and justice delayed is justice denied. There are governments in Africa today that use the language sovereignty to mask their servitude to foreign interest. They claim to act in the name of stability, but what they truly fear is the awakening of their own people. They fear the youth, the millions of young Africans whose minds are sharp, whose spirits are unbroken, and whose patience is running out. They fear a generation that refuses to be bought, refuses to be intimidated, and refuses to inherit chains disguised as treaties. This generation is the beating heart of our continent's future, and no force, no matter how brutal, can stop the tide that is rising. Our struggle is not just against individual or regime that it stands against a system designed to keep Africa divided, dependent, and docile. The weapons of this system are not just guns and prisons, but also debt traps, unfair trade agreements, and the corrupting hand of foreign aid that demands submission in exchange for survival. They create hunger so they can sell us food. They create instability so they can sell us weapons. They create poverty so they can own our resources at the price of scraps. And when we resist, they use our own leaders against us, turning them into enforcers of a neocolonial order. Bernter Africa, that Africa que refuse to bow, that Africa que remembers the bloody des martyrs and the courage of the two revolutionaries, that Africa que nous freedomers oglede des martyrs and the courage of the two revolutionaries, that Africa que nous freedom is not given but taken, not spoken but lived. This Africa is awakening in every corner of the continent, in every protest, in every village that chooses to farm for itself instead of importing food, in every factory that replaces imports with local production, in every community that refuses to sell its land to the highest bidder. This Africa is not asking for permission. It is seizing its destiny. The truth is that the enemies of Africa fear unity more than anything else. They fear that one day the borders drawn in colonial boredoms will mean nothing. They fear that one day African armies will defend African interests instead of being trained to suppress African people. They fear that one day the wealth of Africa will stay in Africa, fueling our industries, our schools, and our healthcare systems instead of lining the pockets of those who see us only as suppliers of raw materials. And yet, unity will not come from speeches alone. It will come from action, from leaders who are willing to put their lives on the line for their people, from citizens who are willing to hold their government accountable, from youth who are willing to reject the comfort of silence for the discomfort of truth. Every African must decide whether they will be part of the generation that broke the chains, or the generation that passed them on. We must also recognize that no foreign power will willingly give up its grip on Africa. Those who have built their empires on our resources will fight to the last to keep them. They will use propaganda to divide us, breed to corrupt us, and force to intimidate us. They will try to convince us that we cannot survive without them, that we are too weak, too poor, too unstable to govern ourselves. But history has shown that the will of a people determined to be free is stronger than any army, stronger than any empire. The African Union must rise to this moment. It must investigate the crime committed against our people by those who have traded their loyalty for foreign approval. It must stop hiding behind bureaucracy and start standing on principle. It must send a message to every leader on this continent. If you brutalize your people, you will be held accountable. If you sell your country's future for personal gain, you will be exposed. If you betray Africa, you will not hide behind the walls of your palace. The truth is shocking, not because it is new, but because it is finally being spoken without fear. For decades, our continentals have been bled dry while our leaders dance to the tune of those who write the checks. But the song is changing. The people are no longer content to clap and cheer for their own oppression. They are demanding a new melody, one of justice, dignity, and true independence. This is not a call for chaos, but for real peace. The kind of peace that comes when justice reigns, when citizens are free to speak without fear, when leaders are servants of their people and not masters of their suffering. A real peace cannot be built on the backs of the silenced, nor can it exist where truth is bound and lies are law. Africa's destiny will not be decided in foreign capitals, but in the streets, fields, classrooms, and factories of Africa itself. It will be decided by the courage of those who refuse to accept que l'oppression est normale, que poverty is inevitable, or que exploitation is the price of survival. It will be decided by the unity of a people who understand that the liberation is one African nation is the liberation of all, and the betrayal of one is the betrayal of all. The hour is late, but it is not too late. The chain can still be broken, the thieves can still be stopped, and the dream of a free and united Africa can still be realized. But it will require sacrifice, courage, and the unshakable belief that our children deserve. To inherit freedom, not fear, dignity, not dependency, pride, not pity. The shocking truth is that the future is in our hands, and no one is coming to save us but ourselves. Across the continent, too many leaders stand before the people wrapped in the language of patriotism and service, yet behind closed doors, their actions tell a very different story. They speak of development while signing deals that strip the land of its wealth. They speak of development while signing deals that strip the land of its wealth and hand it over to foreign corporations for a fraction of its value. They promise justice while building systems that protect the powerful and punish the poor. They proclaim unity while quietly aligning with outside forces that have no interest in Africa's liberation. This hypocrisy corrodes trust, breaks the bond between leaders and citizens, and turns governance into a performance rather than a duty.
The tragedy is not only in the betrayal itself, but in the calculated way it is hidden. Leader posed for cameras at schools they never funded, hospitals they never equipped, and roads they never built. They stand before crowds, reciting words of solidarity, yet their private agreements speak of submission and dependency. They praise the sacrifices of past freedom fighters, but treat the present generation as expendable, silencing those who dare to question their authority. The people are told that such sacrifices are for the greater good, when in reality, they serve the greater greed.
This duplicity is dangerous because it breeds hopelessness. When citizens see their leaders wearing the mask of liberation while acting as gatekeepers for foreign interests, they begin to believe that all leadership is corrupt and all promises are empty. It is not just a betrayal of trust, it is the deliberate strangling of hope. And when hope dies, societies fracture, leaving space for oppression, instability, and exploitation to thrive.
The hypocrisy ended not forever. The truth has a way of surfacing, carried by the voices of those who refuse to be silent. Technology, independent journalism, and grassroots movements now give the people the tools to expose lies and reveal hidden agendas. The new generation is learning to measure leaders not by their speeches, but by their actions, not by their alliance, but by their sacrifices for the nation's dignity.
It is time for the people to demand authenticity over performance, action over theatrics, Leaders who stand with the people must be unafraid to speak the truth, even when it is unpopular, and unafraid to act even when it threatens their own position. The hypocrisy that has plagued governance must end, for only through honesty and true service can the vision of a free, united and sovereign Africa be realized. There comes a moment in history when silence for institutions meant to protect the people becomes as harmful as the injustices themselves. The African Union was not created to be a ceremonial body issuing polite statements that vanish into the air. It was established as a guardian of the continent's dignity, unity, and justice. When nations are shaken by unrest, when state violence is unleashed upon an armed citizen, when the cries of the people echo across borders, it is not enough to watch from a distance. Action is not optional. It is the very mandate upon which such an institution exists. The African Union has the power, resource, and authority to intervene, investigate, and hold leaders accountable when their actions betray the principles of democracy and human rights. Yet too often, the power lies dormant, as if waiting for permission from those very leaders it should be scrutinizing. This paralysis undermines the trust of millions of Africans who look to it as their shield against tyranny. The people do not need empty condemnations, they need concrete measures, investigations, sanctions, and pressure that forces abusers of power to face consequences. The call for action is not a call for division. It is in fact a call for unity. Unity around the values you demand to guide the continent toward freedom and equality. When any nation's citizens are brutalized for demanding fairness, it is not just their nation's problem, it is an African problem. The pain of one people should be felt by all, and the injustice endured by one state weakens the moral fabric of the entire continent. The African Union must understand that inaction in one case sets a precedent for inaction in all, emboldening those who rule with fear and repression. To act now would send a message to build the people and the powerful. Africa will no longer tolerate impunity. It would show that nuanced funding promises are not just ceremonial words, but living commitment that will be enforced when they are most needed. The continent cannot afford to let its premier institution be seen as a spectator to oppression. The time for hesitation has passed. The eyes of Africa and indeed the world are watching. If the African Union is to remain relevant and respected, it must rise to its responsibility, stand with the people, and prove that justice in Africa is more than a dream. It is a duty. For far too long, the shadows of colonialism have lingered over Africa, dressed in new clothes but carrying the same intentions, to dominate, exploit, and control. While the flags of independence were raised decades ago, the mechanism of foreign influence were never dismantled. Instead, they evolved into subtle forms: economic dependency, political manipulation, resource extraction agreements disguised as partnerships, and international institutions that dictate policy while claiming to offer aid. This is neocolonialism, an invisible chain that binds the continent to the will of powers beyond its borders. Rejecting this control is not merely an act of defiance. It is a necessity for survival and dignity. Africa's leaders and people must refuse to be pawns in a global game where the rules are written elsewhere, and the prizes are always taken away from those who rightfully own them. This rejecting begins with recognizing that foreign interests will never prioritize the well-being of African citizens over their own economic and geopolitical gains. Every so-called loan with crippling conditions, every military presence that claims to protect while undermining sovereignty, and every trade agreement that robs nations of fair value for their resources. These are tools of neocolonial. The continent's strength lies in its ability to set its own agenda, rooted in the needs and aspirations of its people. These are people developing independent economic systems, strengthening local industries, controlling the value chains of its own resources, and investing in technology and infrastructure without strings attached to foreign powers. It also means fostering unity among African states to resist divide and rule tactics that pit nations against each other while outsiders profit from the chaos. Rejecting neocolonial control is not a declaration d'isolation. It's a demand for respect and equality on the global stage. Africa has the talent, the resource, and cultural wealth to thrive, without being dictated to by those who see it only as a source of raw materials and cheap labor. But this vision requires courage, courage to walk away from exploitative deals, to build alliances within the continent, and to endure the short-term challenges that come with reclaiming full autonomy. This is a true meaning of liberation in the 21st century. Not just the absence of foreign flags over African capitals, but the absence of foreign chains over African policies, economies, and futures. To reject neocolonial control is to say, with unwavering conviction, that Africa belongs to Africans, and its destiny will be written by their own hands. Across the history of liberation struggle, Hyacinthe Diop s'élève son youth, he has carried the torch of change, burning with a passion unshackled by fear and untouched by the complacency that any can bring. The power of young people is not just in their numbers, but in their vision, their refusal to accept the world as it is, and their determination to shape it into what it should be. They are the restless heartbeat of a continent, the force that can transform frustration into action and despair into hope. Unity is a foundation that amplifies the power. When the youth stand together across borders, languages, and cultures, they form an unstoppable force capable of rewriting history. Division has always been the weapon of those who wish to dominate. They thrive when people are split along tribal, political, or national lines. But when young Africans see themselves not as separate nations, but as part of one great continental family, their combined strength can dismantle even the most entrenched systems of oppression. The energy of the youth is more than just protest and resistance. It is innovation, creativity, and the courage to imagine new systems to serve the people instead of exploiting them. It is a determination to create homegrown solutions to problems that outsiders have failed or refused to solve. From technology to agriculture, from art to policy making, young people hold the tools to design a future that is truly independent and self-sustaining. But unity isn't built on slogans alone. It requires action, dialogue, and willingness to put aside petty differences for the greater good. It's call for solidarity for the greater good. Its call for solidarity extends beyond moments of crisis, a constant commitment to supporting one another in building strong, resilient societies. It means refusing to be used as instruments in the hands of those who divide for personal gain, whether they be corrupt leaders within or foreign powers without. The world is seeing what happens when the youth rise with purpose and unity. Empires crumble, tyrants fall, and chains, both visible and invisible, are broken. The responsibility now is to channel that strength into lasting transformation, ensuring that the sacrifices made are not wasted on temporary victories. The youth are not just the future, they are the present, and when united, they are the architects of a free, dignified, and prosperous Africa. If you want to give a powerful call to action closing paragraph to attach at the end so this section feels like a rallying cry, would you like me to add that? True independence is not simply the lowering of one flag and the raising of another. It is not a death mark in history books, nor is it a ceremony attended by dignitaries. True independence is the complete freedom of a people to determine their own destiny without interference, manipulation, or control from outside forces. It is the ability to govern according to the will of the people, to manage resources for the benefit of the nation, and to shape a future that reflects the values, culture, and aspirations of its citizens. For too long, many nations have lived under the illusion of independence, politically free on paper, yet bound by economic chains, military dependence, and policies dictated from faraway capitals. This is not liberation, it is simply a softer form of domination, one that hides behind agreements, debts, and partnerships that benefit the few while keeping the majority in poverty. True independence demands the dismantling of these neocolonial structures and the building of systems that put the needs of the people above the interests of foreign powers. Achieving this requires courage, which means making decisions that may anger those who have long exploited national resources, which means rejecting aid that comes with strings attached, refusing to sign deals that strip away sovereignty, and building industries, infrastructure, and defense capabilities from within. It is about controlling land, water, minerals, and every other resource so that they serve the people first, not external corporations or governments. True independence also lives in the minds of the people. It begins with education that teaches pride in one's history, resilience in the face of adversity, and confidence in the ability to solve problems without relying on those who once oppressed. It requires cultural revival, restoring languages, traditions, and values that were once suppressed to weaken identity. When a nation reaches a level of self-reliance, it cannot be bullied, bribed, or destabilized. It cannot shine proudly among the nations of the world, not as a subordinate or dependent, but as an equal. That is the independence we're fighting for. A freedom that is not symbolic, but tangible, not fragile, but enduring, not conditional, but absolute. And it is this form of independence that will truly honor the sacrifices of those who fought for liberation in generations past.